Okay, good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Jaelyn Leslie. I am a Alabama CSC graduate fellow from Hampton University, and today we'll be talking about the potential long-term impact of the 2013 morbillivirus associated mass stranding event in common bottlenose dolphins, Tursiops truncatus from Virginia. So common bottlenose dolphins are a sentinel species for environmental monitoring because they are a long-lived apex predator in both coastal and estuarine environments, and their health reflects the status of ecosystems, and that can be through anthropogenic factors, emerging infectious agents, and natural stressors. And the image to your left is a common bottlenose dolphin that was found stranded, and this is how they conduct their necropsies at the Virginia Aquarium Stranding Response Program, which is also who provided me with my data set for this project. So why should we be concerned about marine mammal populations? So in the last 35 years, there has been an increased effort to monitor marine mammals, and that is in response to the occurrence of unusual mortality events. And an unusual mortality event can be defined as a significant increase in strandings and mortality, 1 to 2-fold higher than the average annual strandings. And a stranding can be defined as, a dolphin is considered stranded when it is found on a beach or in the water dead, also alive on the beach and unable to return to the water. And so the picture to your right is the global stranding networks around the world. And so they collect long-term stranding data, which they can use to compare to annual stranding rates to identify unusual mortality events. And so what is cetacean morbillivirus? It is a single-stranded RNA virus in the Paramyxoviridae family, which also includes measles, rinderpest, and canine distemper. And there have been 5 strains of morbillivirus identified since the first discovery of porpoise morbillivirus. And this is transmissible across marine mammal species as well as within species. And overall, this virus depletes the dolphin's immune system, allowing them to be more susceptible to opportunistic infections like fungal, bacterial, viral, and parasitic. And those subclinical infections are the ultimate cause of death. And so my research question to this project was, are there differences in the stranding frequencies and body condition of common bottlenose dolphins between years pre, which is 2008 through 2012, and post 2014 through 2018, the 2013 cetacean morbillivirus outbreak in Virginia waters? And so my first objective was to identify anomalies in the stranding frequency based off of age, sex, and seasonality. And objective 2 was to develop a body condition scoring system based on early decomposition specimen necropsy photographs. And necropsies are just a postmortem examination of stranded animals. And so they identify a lot of histology and gross pathology, as well as try to identify the cause of death. And then objective 3 was to evaluate the effectiveness of the body condition score versus the independent use of variables for cetacean body condition. And so the study area is 7,000 miles of the Virginia coastline, because this is the region that the Virginia Aquarium Stranding Response Program is in charge of monitoring. And so they gave me long-term stranding data from 2008 to 2018, which I used to conduct a stranding frequency analysis. And the map is every single one of those red dots is a stranding from that 2008 through 2018 data set. And then I also use post-mortem examination photos to screen for different parameters that went into my body condition scoring system. And so the first parameter that I looked at was postnuclear depression, which is the loss of tissue of the nuchal pad, which you can see underneath the horizontal line that it's on the dorsal surface of the dolphin. There is some concavity, so that is a positive detection of postnuclear depression, also referred to as the peanut head sometimes. And then the second one was rib visibility, which is just the obvious observation of the rib cage along the thoracic wall, also due to tissue loss. So the top image would be considered robust and a negative detection of rib visibility. And then the bottom image is a positive detection. As you can see, you can obviously see the rib cage along the ball. And then I also did a skin lesion detection and classification. So for detection, it was just whether or not there were skin lesions present on these specimens. And then the classification, there were a list of 7 potentially pathogenic skin lesions that I was screening for. So here's 2 examples of those lesions that are associated with other pathogens. So the first is a vesicular lesion, and the second is a white fringe lesion, which is associated with poxvirus that is known as a subclinical infection of morbillivirus. And so for the body condition score that I gave to each of these specimens, this is kind of the equation that I used to sum that score. So each of those parameters received a score of 1 or 0, 1 for present, 0 for absent. And then I sum that together, and so each specimen received a score of 0 for good, 1 to 2 for moderate, or 3 for poor. And then I also calculated the prevalence of each of these parameters within my sample population. So the prevalence was just the number of specimens with a positive detection divided by the total number of specimens that were screened. Moving to my results. First, for the stranding frequencies, my first objective was to identify anomalies in stranding frequency. So here you can see stranding frequencies pre and post outbreak were not significantly different, suggesting that there was no long-term impact on strandings of these common bottlenose dolphins after the outbreak. But if you look within the bars of 2013, you can see that there was a significant increase in strandings. And specifically looking at this black bar, that represents the juvenile age class. So juveniles dominated the stranding frequency during the outbreak year. And then here I wanted to look at the differences in the monthly stranding frequencies pre and post outbreak. And so from both, there was no significant difference between those median stranding frequencies pre and post outbreak per month. And strandings increased from March through May and decreased through June through February. But during, for both pre and post, but during the UME, this shifted towards an increase from June to August and then decreasing from September through February. And then here was the prevalence of the body condition score parameters. So rib visibility did increase from pre to post outbreak years by 9.5%, but this was not significant. Postnuclear depression actually did decrease slightly from 22.2 to 20.9%, which was also not significant. And then the lesion prevalence decreased from 47.4% to 20.9%. And this was the only body condition parameter that had a significant difference from pre to post outbreak. And so here's the prevalence of those body condition scores. So how many of these dolphins fit within each of these categories? So in pre-outbreak years, it was split 50-50 within the good and moderate body condition score category. And then that shifted post-outbreak to a majority of the specimens being within the moderate body condition score and a 4% increase into the poor body condition score category. But there was no significant difference between the prevalence of these body condition scores pre and post-outbreak. And so here is a table of the Akaiiki information criteria from a general linear model. So I use this to determine the effectiveness of the body condition score. And so what we're going to focus on is the weight and the AICC. The weight is the proportion of the predictability that the model has on the data. And the AICC is the corrected AIC score, which is the information score and determines which model is the best fit. So the higher the weight, the better the fit the model, as well as the lower the AICC score, the better the fit. And so our model 1 contained just the composite body condition score. So that was that score of 0 through 3. And this was the best fit model with a weight of 0.45 and an AICC of 39.4. And conversely, what the model, including each of those parameters as a separate entity, so lesion detection, postnuclear depression, and rib visibility, and as well as the included sex, was the least fit model and with a weight of 0.01 and the highest AICC score of 47.4. Suggesting that the composite body condition score is a better method for assessing body condition than looking at each of these parameters separately. And so a summary of my results. So the Virginia unusual mortality event did not last beyond 2013, suggesting that there was no long-term impact on the dolphin population in Virginia waters. Juvenile males dominated the stranding record during 2013, and the body condition score was not significantly different pre and post outbreak, suggesting no detection of long-term impact on the body condition of these dolphins. And the combined body condition score is a better method than the independent assessment of the body condition score parameters. And so why did the UME only last 1 year in Virginia waters? So NOAA stated that this unusual mortality event persisted through 2015 along the Atlantic coast, but in Virginia, as we saw, those stranding frequencies returned to normal annual levels following that year. And so a study by Barker et al. Was looking at live dolphin sightings in Virginia waters. And so there's an increase in dolphin sightings from June through August. And that is due to the overlapping of coastal stocks in Virginia waters. So that's increasing the population. And so during 2013, when those coastal stocks migrated and came into Virginia waters and introducing the morbillivirus, and so either most or all of the susceptible individuals in 2013 died. So then as dolphins migrated out of Virginia waters and came back in subsequent years, the remaining living population would have acquired immunity and making it an insufficient ecosystem to proliferate past 2013. So there was reduced transmission. And then, so working through this body condition scoring assessment, there was a lot of limitations that I had based off of the angles at which the necropsy photographs were taken. So it made it difficult to make an accurate positive or negative detection on a lot of these images. And so one thing that I suggested was the standardization of the photographs for these specific landmarks, because we could also apply a more photogrammetric approach and be able to measure the depth of this postnuclear depression, be able to analyze total lesion coverage instead of just the positive or negative detection, as well as we could apply a scaled score to each of these individual parameters. So instead of a 1 or 0 for positive or negative detection, we could scale each of these parameters as emaciated, normal, and robust. And that would help with the model too, and to be able to define better which of these parameters has more influence on the body condition score. Because as of right now, they all have an additive effect, meaning it doesn't really matter which combination of these parameters there are. It's just the number of parameters that are present that are indicative on the body condition score. And so my acknowledgements, I would like to acknowledge LMRCSC for funding me and providing me with the platform to finish this. This is my master's thesis project. The Virginia Aquarium, specifically Dr. Susan G. Barco and Dr. Alex Casides with their, for serving on my committee as well as providing me with the data. Hampton University, my advisor, Dr. Carolina Bonine, Dr. Tunde Adebola, and Dr. Deidre Gibson. Statistical support, Dr. Andre Kordiski and Dr. Kara Schweitzer, as well as undergraduate students who assisted me with some of the screening processes, Leah Morris and Gigi Collier. Any questions?
Let's go ahead with questions.
So you mentioned that in Virginia waters that the population after it died out, the ones came back and then got immunity. So what do you think would happen in the Atlantic waters where that did not happen and instead persisted to 2015?
So the Virginia area specifically is a smaller ecosystem, and so there isn't much like overlapping contact between neighboring dolphin communities. So in more like the coastal open ocean areas, there's more contact specifically with juvenile males because They have wider ranging patterns and they're known to like go off even further and they kind of dumb because they're young males, that's what they say. And so they're more likely to come in contact with these infected dolphins. And that's probably why it was proliferating more throughout the Southeast rather than within the Virginia waters. Also because we had so many deaths that year, there weren't really many susceptible individuals left once they came back. Thank you for your question.
So really great talk. My one question was, is there monitoring due to using molecular methods to look at the prevalence of the virus to see if even stranding or even like the live population to see whether or not it's present or not, if that comes to a point where it causes those mass strandings.
So I know that they definitely like test to see like when these dolphins strand, they're testing, okay, are they positive for cetacean morbillivirus? I'm not sure if they're doing that for live dolphins, but one thing that is starting to be discussed more is the use of skin lesions as kind of like an indicator for stress within the population. So there's a study that was conducted during this UME looking at skin lesion prevalence in, I believe it was Roanoke Sound. And so they were kind of trying to use that to gauge like how stressed out the population was. And that could potentially like indicate, we need to do some sampling and testing to figure out, is it anthropogenic, is it virus, so on and so forth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we have time for one more question for Jaelyn. We are obviously running behind because of the technical difficulties, but I budget time for the speakers to have their allotted amount of time. All right, that's not good.
So what part of the illness would actually cause the strandings? Do you know? Was it like, does it cause them a weakness or like disorientation or stuff like that?
So overall, it just decreases their immunity. So it's not necessarily morbillivirus that causes the death. It's those subclinical infections that come afterwards. So yeah, like I was just about to say, it's kind of like how an autoimmune disorder would work. You're more susceptible to these infections. So usually the cause of death is when they do the gross pathology, it's related to some other infection too. Yeah. Thank you.